right, so we're going to talk about marketing. Are you guys ready? Marketing. All right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what is marketing, and we're going to talk about some business strategies. We're going to talk about some different growth strategies. For example, market penetration, market development, diversification, and new product development. We'll talk about that later on in the class. But first I want to talk and get your input as to what is marketing, because that's what we're going to be talking about on an ongoing basis is marketing. And what I want to share with you is something that is going to enable us to get our arms around the idea of marketing, which we refer to as the marketing mix. And the marketing mix consists of the 4 Ps. So if somebody says, well, what is marketing about? The 4 Ps, although it sounds simplistic as a way to describe marketing, is really rather complex. But it's a good place for us to start because I think it's something that enables us to understand the scope of what we're going to be talking about. So the marketing mix are those factors that we can control. And the 4 Ps include price, product, place, and promotion. And promotion also includes advertising. But advertising doesn't start with a P. But in general, in the industry, it's normal when we think about advertising that we see that as part of promotion, sales promotion, trade promotion, consumer promotions, and all of that plus advertising. So the 4 Ps, that's an important buzzword, if you will, in terms of marketing. That's really what marketing is all about, is how we as executives and business people change the 4 Ps. Because remember, the marketing mix are those things that we can control. We can control the price. We determine the price. Not the invisible hand, but business executives, managers, we determine the price that we're going to sell our product or service. We determine the features and benefits of the product. We determine the messaging for our advertising campaign and how much that we're going to spend on advertising and where we're going to distribute our product.
So we don't really set the price though, because although if it's set the price of whatever they want, the consumer really sets the price because it's what they're willing to pay.
So absolutely, we want to identify the price that consumers are willing to pay. And there's 5 key activities in marketing. The first activity is to identify an unmet need. So this is also a broad look at marketing, because you can take lots of courses in marketing. You could read many books in marketing. You could read thousands and thousands of pages of marketing. But just so that we start our discussion at a place where we could sort of get the big picture when we think about marketing. So I want you to understand where we're starting from and where we're going to end up. So the first step in marketing is to identify an unmet need. And in order to do that, we're going to do marketing research. We're going to do qualitative research and quantitative research. We're going to do primary research, and we might also purchase secondary research. Who could tell us the difference between qualitative and quantitative research? Go ahead.
How much quality the product is, how much the product is actual value versus how much it's actually being sold. Is the product how much of a quality object is the thing that you're selling versus what everyone's qualitative is how many you're selling?
Well, think about it from a research perspective. So, for example, qualitative research, a good example of qualitative research would be focus groups. And focus groups We have 10 or 12 people that presumably are in our target market. The target market is those people that we want to buy our product. And we get their input on what are some of the problems they're experiencing in, let's say, cooking or in using cooking products, for example. And we'll share with them a variety of concepts to try and understand whether or not those concepts are going to solve the problems that they have. But after doing 4 rounds of focus group, we're going to basically have interviewed 48 people. We don't really have anything statistically significant there where we could say 87% said that one of the problems they have is food sticking to the pot. Now, if consumers say that in their research, that's helpful to us, because then what we're going to do is test that in quantitative research. So we're going to do a survey. It could be a mail survey, it could be a phone survey, it could be an internet survey. But with that survey, we're going to try to get about 1,500 respondents. And with 1,500 respondents, in most categories, in most markets, that's something statistically significant if it's a representative random sample. So if the people that completed the survey are representative of our target market, so we have to have a proportional number of men or women that make up our target market. Now, it might just be that we need to interview all women. Maybe it's a product that's purchased and used by only women. Then it's appropriate for the sample to be only women. And then maybe sometimes we want to get information about women in a certain age group. That's okay, but it just needs to be representative of who it is that we want to buy the product. So qualitative research and quantitative research are different, but they work hand in hand, because once we have the qualitative research, that's going to be the basis for our quantitative research. But we're going to come back to that. Market research is in Chapter 8. We're going to talk quite a bit more about how we identify an unmet need. But you made a good point about price. The next step, the next marketing activity, is to identify a concept. And once we identify and develop a concept, then we're going to determine a price that the customer is willing to pay. So far we have 3 activities. Identify an unmet need, develop a concept, determine a price that the customer is willing to pay. Number 4 is to gain distribution. And 5 is to build awareness. Everybody got that? Who could tell me, so what are the 5 key marketing activities? What are they? Go ahead. Tell me your name.
Moshe.
Okay, Moshe, go ahead.
Identify a key need. So what everyone statistically, I guess, and would want. Then develop a concept for it. So come up with a model, how it would work. 3, come up with a price that would be fair, and fair for everyone to buy, but also for everyone to make a profit. Number 4 is to find distribution, and who's going to buy it, and actually, didn't write down number 5. No.
5 is to build awareness. And importantly, what we want to do is get distribution first before we start to advertise. So we need to be on the shelf, so to speak, literally and figuratively, in Walmart, Kmart, wherever it is that is appropriate to sell our product. Macy's, Bloomingdale's, Best Buy, Pathmark, Key Food, D'Agostino's, Kroger's, wherever is appropriate for our product, we should have the product available before we start to advertise. Because what we want to do is not spend a lot of money on advertising and then have the customer go into the store and then find out that the product is not available. Now, in some industries, it's common to create some hype where the product is not available, and that's intentional, to create this image of scarcity, and sometimes that makes a product more desirable. But we have to determine whether or not the category is one that's prone to high involvement or low involvement purchases. So if it's a high involvement purchase, then people will go back. Like, for example, music is something that people are very engaged in. Or gaming. Do you agree? If they don't have it, even though they said the release date was January 15th, you go there, they don't have your game, or they don't have the CD, then very often people will go back a few days later or the next week. But in some categories, that's not the case. In some categories, it's low involvement, and if you go there and they don't have the product, then you might leave. And you may not come back. And what that means is we have to spend more money on advertising to get people to go back into the store to search for the product. So it's always better to have distribution first. So the order is important. Before you start spending $10, $15, $20 million on advertising to make people aware of our product or service, create interest and desire, and ultimately to take action, and then to find out that their action was in vain. Then that model is this. So what we do is we try to get people's attention, create interest, develop desire, and ultimately get them to take action. But this is a cycle that has to occur. Now, in order to get from attention to action involves a significant amount of marketing communication and a significant investment. So we're spending millions of dollars to make that a reality. So if they go there and the product is not there, that's a big problem. Go ahead. So the first one is to get people's attention. So our goal is, when we're advertising, is to get people's attention. And that's why you see some of the ads, they're quite creative. And even if you don't like the ad, it's okay, even if the ad is annoying, if it gets your attention, if it creates some stopping power for you to say, what's going on here? And it's able to communicate the key features and benefits of the product, or create interest. So you develop a need to know more about the product or service, and ideally make you want the product, right? Create a desire for the product, even though if we've done our marketing research properly, we've already identified the unmet need, so now we're just making people aware of the product or service. We're just making them aware of the solution. It shouldn't be a tough sell for us to get people to buy the product, since we've already done the research and we know what their problems are. But still, we want to instill in them this desire for the product and ultimately get them to take action. Which means action is either they log on and search for the product on the internet. So they go to Amazon.com to buy the product, or they leave their house and they go to Walmart or some other store. If not immediately, the next day, but at some point shortly after they saw our ad. So that's why it's important to make sure the product is available. Because it's only in unique circumstances that they would actually go back and look for the product again after they went in the store and they were sold out. Do you agree? In some categories it makes sense, right? Any of you guys gamers? What do you think? If the game is not there the day they said it was going to be released, then you're gonna go back, right? If it's something that you're really enthusiastic about, then that's going to be a high involvement purchase for you. But other products, not so much. And depends on the individual. What might be a high involvement purchase for you may not be a high involvement purchase for somebody else. So it's definitely, it's personal. And usually price, the level of price is usually associated with high involvement purchases, although it's not the only indicator. But then again, keep in mind, what's considered to be expensive for one person may not be expensive for another. But the idea is, what we need to understand is the consumer behavior. That what behavior will we anticipate if our product is considered to be a high involvement or a low involvement purchase. That's why we need to understand that. That's why we need to do the research. That's why we need to understand consumer behavior so that we can plan accordingly.
Sometimes don't businesses or companies only release a certain amount to keep a tension between the consumers? Like Apple, you have to sign up before you get the iPhone. If it's not there when you get there, you didn't get it, you have to return the next day. It's part of building tension. They sort of create this drama for you.
Yeah, they try to create this pent-up demand, this hype, if you will. But I would think that that type of product is something that people would consider to be high involvement. Would you agree? Like for an iPhone, people will come back. People will stand online for 15 hours to get the product or to get the Xbox 360. Now, maybe that's not you, but we need to understand that a certain percentage of the market behaves that way. So we need to have a strategy and tactic that's going to be able to address that dynamic in the marketplace.
Yeah, I just thought I'd share. I saw an interesting ad last night. It was just, I was watching a basketball game. I saw something for Taco Bell's was saying that you can get the new PlayStation system before it even comes out in the market, but through a contest. So that's a way that someone has it now. There's so much hype on like your friend who has it,
Right.
based on you, and not the rest of the market's not available to them. So it's like a coveted thing now.
Right, absolutely. And it's interesting that they picked a gaming console,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's very relevant to what we're talking about, definitely.
That's who the target market is, because whoever eats for that fast food is more like, I guess, teenagers, and who plays games is teenagers.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, absolutely. We need to understand all of that. We need to understand the consumer profile. Who is our target market? And we say, who is our target market? Yes, part of that is what we're trying to understand is the psychographics, the lifestyle, which is what Jason is talking about. What is the lifestyle of our target market? That they eat fast food, that they eat at Taco Bell, that they golf, whatever it is that's part of their lifestyle, as well as their age, their occupation, their gender, their ethnicity, their religion. How are those things going to help us? What if we find out that, go ahead.
Yeah, it will help us find the market where we're going to sell it, and the most profitability, I guess. Because like, if you're going to sell a burrito to a 85-year-old, like you're not going to go for that. You understand why.
Well, maybe the 85-year-old is not going to eat the burrito, but or maybe they will, but they're just not going to be into gaming. I don't know. It depends. We have to see what the research what the research tells us. So it's not what we think; it's what the research reveals. What consumers are what the consumers view as favorable, what they're willing to purchase, what they like, because they vote with their dollars. So there's no such thing as a great idea. You don't have any great ideas. I don't have any great ideas. The only great idea is the one that the customer says they will buy. That's the only great idea. And the only way we could find that out is through research. So that's an overview of marketing. Those are the 5 key activities, and each of those activities are vast. But to give you a sense of the entire process, that's what we mean when we talk about marketing. Those activities, and of course closely related to that is the marketing mix, which that's our toolkit. Those are the controllable factors. Now there's uncontrollable factors, like for example,
Environmental change.
yeah, environmental change, government regulation,
Technology
the
change.
economy, technological advances. We can't control if the economy is in a recession. So if the economy is in a recession, of course, that's going to have an impact on the demand for our product. But that's not something that we control. But if there is a recession, what could we do? What could we do?
Just
Lower our prices.
Yeah, we could lower our price. See, that's something that we could do. That's part of the marketing mix. That's a controllable factor. Then we have to determine how much we would lower the price, because we want to understand if we lower the price 10%, how much will total revenue increase, and how much will our net income increase as a result. Now, in an elastic market is a market that's price sensitive. That means when the price goes down, the demand is going to increase. The question is, by how much? That becomes a bit more of a challenge for us to determine. That's something that we need to model to try and understand what's the nature of that behavior. Is it directly proportional? Because we're going to have to make decisions on how many units we're going to produce based on what we anticipate demand to be. See, sometimes this issue of scarcity is not really a deliberate strategy on the part of the company. It's not really their attempt to create hype or this pent-up demand, as you were suggesting. Sometimes they just didn't forecast correctly and they don't have enough product. Because forecasting is very difficult. What we're trying to do is determine how many units we're going to need to meet demand. None of us, we don't have any crystal ball. I don't mind telling you, I've been in business 20 years plus. I'm not ashamed to say that forecasting is something that's difficult. $100 billion companies struggle with forecasting demand. It's very challenging to anticipate what the demand is going to be. And based on what we anticipate demand to be, is going to influence our production schedule. Now, how long does it take to make a particular product? Because when we get an order from Walmart for 100,000 units, for most products, that's not something you can make in a weekend. You know that each holiday season, there's some new toy that comes out. Some kind of new teddy bear or electronics, like, you know, they used to have like Tickle Me Elmo. You know when they start making Tickle Me Elmo? They start making it a year in advance of the fourth quarter. So 10 months, 12 months before they're going to ship the product from China is when they start making it. So they've already started producing Tickle Me Elmo that they're going to ship in September of this year. Because if you're going to sell, let's say, 25 million units, right? If you need to produce that many, the production period could be months, even years. And that's why it's so challenging when you think about the demand for the new iPhone and the new iPad. Well, if it's going to be available on February 1st, that means they've had to start making that like in the summer to be able to meet demand. How long do you think it takes to assemble one of those iPads? 5 minutes? I mean, just imagine if you have to make 25 million of them. I mean, it's going to take you months, many months to produce that many. So We also have production limitations. We have a certain limitation in our capacity. And so that's why there's this dilemma, if you will, for managers, because you don't want to make too much, but then also you're limited by how many you can make because of either the number of employees that you have or the number of pieces of equipment. But you don't want to have too much equipment, because look at what happened to the auto industry, for example. One of the biggest reasons why General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler have struggled over the last 10 and 20 years is because in the 1970s, were any of you alive then? No, probably not. In the 1970s, they were the market share leaders. We didn't have Toyota dominating the U.S. auto market. So they had this huge capacity, the ability to make millions and millions of cars. But then what happened is, as foreign competition entered the market, they sold fewer and fewer and significantly fewer cars. But what didn't change is their huge manufacturing capacity. And that's a huge fixed cost for their organization. And fixed costs have got to be accounted for. You can't ignore them. Questions? Are we good? Are we great?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
All right. All right, so the question is, how are we going to achieve our objectives? In any organization, there has to be 3 plans. There's 3 levels, basic levels in an organization. There's the corporate, business, and functional. We're going to talk a little bit now about business strategy. So we need to have a plan. In order to make our business strategy real, we need to have a plan. So where does it start? At the top. There's got to be a corporate plan. That's what defines the business plan, and that's what defines the functional plan. So what is the corporate plan? The corporate plan is the plan that's developed by the senior management team that addresses the mission, the values I should say, and vision of the organization. So the corporate plan includes the mission, the vision, and the values of the organization. Those are 3 key components. It's not limited to that, but that's certainly 3 of the key components.
Mission, vision, and what?
Values. So the mission, and I should add that there's a tendency nowadays to define mission and vision as the same, but really they're not. All right, the intent is different. But sometimes those terms are used interchangeably. But let me clarify that for you. Mission is the business that the company is in now. So what is your mission as an organization? Is to provide, let's say, educational learning devices to high school students in North America. Now, also keep in mind that the mission and the vision of the organization should be short. This is not your entire strategic plan. Everybody in the organization should be able to communicate what the mission is for the organization. everybody, from the president of the company down to administrative assistants, janitorial staff, everybody should be able to internalize what that is. So if somebody is asked, what is the mission of your organization? Everybody, somebody at the switchboard, they should be able to communicate the mission of the organization. So it needs to be, what I would say is, deceptively simplistic. So it needs to encompass the organizational goal in a broad way. But the vision is where we want to be. See, that was the original intent of having the mission and vision. The mission is a definition of the business in which we currently operate, but the vision is where we want to be in the future. So our vision might be something like to be the #1 market share in educational learning devices for high school students around the world. Now, you see how that's different from the mission, or no? What do you think? Are they the same from what I described? Right? The mission simply said that we're in the business of developing educational learning devices for high school students in North America. But then we said our vision is to be the leading or the market share, leading market share or #1 market share producing educational device company worldwide. See, that's where we want to be. We're not there now, but that's where we want to be in the future. So you see that? You see the difference? So one is where we are now, it defines our business now, and then the vision is where we want to be in the future. Even in our textbook, they sort of blend those terms. That was never really the intent. So, and the intent is the way that I described it to you, as the vision is being forward-looking and where we're going to be in the future.
Well, usually when you describe mission, like when a team goes on a mission, like it's something that hasn't occurred yet. Like I feel like in a way, like in order to accomplish the mission, you need to finish it, which has a lot to do with the vision. So.
Yeah, well, absolutely. They're definitely interrelated. Absolutely. But the vision is definitely more aspirational, as you described, as like where we want to be. But what I'm saying the mission is actually where we're starting from. So you're saying that the mission is to get to some place. But in this case, we're saying that, well, we're starting from here, and then we have an aspirational goal to achieve another objective. So we need to define our business. Like, what is it that we do? What is it we do on a daily basis? On a daily basis, we produce educational learning devices in the North American market. That's what we do. And there should be focus. And you'll see there's, we're going to talk about growth strategies. There used to be many companies that focused on diversification. They didn't have that kind of focus, and that was very popular in the 70s. Tobacco companies owned food companies. Those types of things were very common. Sears used to be the nation's, in the United States, used to be the nation's largest retailer. Sears. And they acquired an insurance company, Allstate. They acquired a brokerage firm, Dean Witter. They acquired Discover Card. And that was very common. But now Wall Street is rewarding companies for being focused. And now you see companies are shedding these other organizations and they're trying to focus. In fact, that's actually what Sears did ultimately, was
So
Although, yeah, they sold them off, although Allstate was very successful, and we're going to talk about how it relates to this model, because what happened is, Allstate, for example, was a star in this model. We're going to talk about the BCG model. But the cash cow was Sears retail operations. So they used the profits that they generated from Sears retail to fund the growth of Allstate and Discover Card and Dean Witter Services. But then they came full circle. And then they ultimately decided that they were going to refocus on being the best at what originally was the key to the company's success, which was retail. And that's something that they've been struggling to do for like the last 15 or 20 years. In fact, a few years ago, several years ago now, they came together with Kmart. So Kmart and Sears are one company, which is both companies had been struggling for quite a while. So you might wonder if that was a brilliant thing to do, right, for two weak companies to come together. But that's what they did, and that was really key to their survival, because if that didn't happen, both companies would have gone out of business.
Yeah, just a question on that. I don't know. I feel like most of the time it doesn't always work out that way when two weak sources combine to work together to try to make a better product. Why do you think that is? That when two weaker sources combine their resources, why doesn't it necessarily like enhance it so much? Why is it just like with this it kind of stayed the same? I know Sims and Filene's Basement combined, and that didn't work out. Different companies, a lot of times Sprint combined with Nextel didn't do anything for them.
Yeah, well, ideally what you want to do is combine with a partner that has complementary skills or some sort of competitive advantage. So, in other words, your strength is their weakness, and their weakness is your strength. But for companies that are really struggling, they have so many weaknesses that it's just sort of like the blind leading the blind, right? That they can't help themselves, no less help each other. But you'd like to think that there would be some synergistic effect from them coming together. Sometimes that happens. Like, for example, Johnson & Johnson. They're known for having a portfolio of companies. So, but they're decentralized, but what makes up Johnson & Johnson is these group of companies. Also Newell Incorporated is also made up of a couple of dozen companies. And the key to their success has been the centralization of their operating systems. So Procter & Gamble is also a good example. Very successful. They acquire other companies and integrate them. But in order for that to happen, you need to be operating from a position of strength, and then take a weak company and show them how to do it better.
Big Brother type move.
Right. But I mean, it doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. Two small companies or struggling companies, that they couldn't come together and together be bigger than they were operating independently. Because certainly two companies operating independently are going to have redundancy. So one of the advantages of coming together is, well, now you only need one HR department. And now, well, how many manufacturing facilities do you need? So you might be able to combine manufacturing facilities. You might be able to, reduce the number of employees significantly. So you have to look for those types of efficiencies. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen at the level that people anticipate, because there's a cost associated with that merger. But it depends. You got to take it on a case-by-case basis. But I wouldn't say categorically two weak companies coming together are doomed. But it does seem like very often it's hard for them to emerge successfully from their troubles, because very often they wait to a point where their situation is so bad that even combining is really just an act of desperation. But it really depends on the case. Yes, go ahead.
So, a few questions. Number one, when this happens, when they combine, how does it define like who is the sort of the boss? Like who becomes like the weaker company in the?
Well, yeah, that's something that the parties have to agree upon, and that's one of the issues is really in integrating those companies. That's one of the biggest challenges in two different corporate cultures coming together. And you're right, there is this power struggle. Sometimes it has to do with the level of assets. Is one of the ways that usually they decide which company is going to have the decision-making power. So one company might have $50 million in assets, another company might have $25 million in assets. So they might say, well, we're not merging, we're acquiring you. Right? That's different.
Right.
Than to say, oh, well, we're both, the same size company, and we're on equal footing, as opposed to saying, well, it's not really a partnership per se. We've actually bought your company out.
And another question is, can this be done in order to like promote, like when, for example, two famous companies or one famous and another one is not so much? Can this be like just promotion, just in terms of like image, because either two X great companies united, and like in terms of for example stock or like shares, would that go up? Would that affect on that? Just names, not like before we see the results. When we just hear the company.
Oh, and anticipation, absolutely. So the market will anticipate that there's going to be a reduction in the number of employees. There's going to be, other savings and efficiencies that are going to be achieved, and certainly that's going to impact the
usually
stock price.
anticipation is more positive, or it's more like, let's wait, or people are right away more like, yeah, this is probably going to.
Well, I would like to think that it's going to be perceived as positive, but then the question is, were our expectations set too high? So it should be an agreed upon outcome. The two companies agreed that the best strategic thing to do is for us to combine and help each other, and together we could be successful. So presumably the marketplace at large, right, Wall Street, is in agreement with the strategy that the senior management team of these organizations came up with. And yes, that's the right thing, and you're right, overall the company's going to be more profitable, and the stock price would go up. But it depends on what the actual proposal is.
Is there ever a possibility that the mission statement can change once you achieve your vision, or even?
Oh, absolutely.
Even so
yeah, sure.
In this case, the business company of the educational learning device, right? So let's say you say your mission is that you provide educational learning devices to schools, high schools. And your vision is that you provide worldwide. Once you achieve that, your mission statement is still that you want to provide educational learning devices to high schools. The fact is, you're just doing it worldwide.
Right. So it's okay to adjust your mission statement to reflect changes in the environment. If you achieve certain goals, or maybe you have certain setbacks, then you could adapt it. Yeah, that's okay. And in some cases, I think what you're saying is that your vision becomes your mission. So once you achieve that, yeah, I think that's plausible. And then you have to decide, well, where do we go from there? So absolutely. So that's what we talk about in the corporate plan. But the thing is that senior management doesn't have operational power. So in other words, once the senior management team addresses some of these issues, and that's not the only thing that's in the corporate plan, but certainly three of the key things that they talk about are the mission, the vision, and the values for the entire organization. Then the strategic business units, known as SBUs, the strategic business units are then tasked with making that vision a reality, making that mission a reality. So in of itself, the key is that in of itself, it's not enough just to have a mission statement. It's got to be real. How do you bring that to life? So then you're going to rely on the business units, which could be, now that's different from the functional units, which are, right, these are 3 levels in the organization and 3 plans. So we talk about in chapter 2 is 3 plans in an organization. An organization is going to have all 3 plans operating simultaneously, the corporate plan, the business plan, and the functional plans. The functional plans would be like the plan that the marketing department has, is an example of a functional plan. Or the manufacturing department. There needs to be shared goals and objectives. So whatever the key goals and objectives are of the corporate plan has got to be part of the business plan. Because the business plan is the way that the strategic business unit, that division, is going to make the mission and vision a reality.
Yeah, just I don't really understand fully like what business. I know that they're supposed to, like you said, bring it to life, but like how do they do that? What is that? Do you mind giving an example of that?
So, for example, let's say in a given company, let's say an electronics company. So an electronics company like Sony, for example, they have their corporate plan. But then they have a variety of strategic business units. So they have a group of divisions. Like, for example, their TVs, laptops, right? Computers. What else? Gaming consoles.
Cameras.
What did I miss here so far? MP3? So let's say that one of our strategies or part of our mission is to be the leading or the #1 electronics producer worldwide. All right, well, that's interesting. I mean, that's, yeah, why not? Let's say that's the vision for the organization, right, where they want to be. Then it's up to each of these strategic business units to make that a reality. So then the division that produces flat panel monitors, they've got to produce the product that's going to outsell other producers of monitors, right, if they want to be the market share leader. And then the same with laptops and game consoles and DVD players. Right? They have to develop strategies and tactics that are going to make that a reality. So that means that if we're going to be the world's largest and leading market share producer of electronics, that means that all our strategic business units, all our divisions have got to be the leading producer. That means, I mean, we could try. I mean, maybe we won't be in TVs, but our goal is to be leading producer of all of those categories, of all of those strategic business units.
Was basically to make the mission come to reality.
Yes, right? They're the strategic business units are going to make the mission and the vision a reality. That's where it becomes operationalized. Because really, what is the corporate plan? For the most part, it's just words. It says this is our goal. But then, well, how do you, that's nice, great. The senior management team has set the direction for the entire organization. And there may be some strategies. Sometimes in a centralized organization, they might actually provide direction to each one of these strategic business units and tell them some key strategies or areas of development or focus. But every day, each of these strategic business units has got to be working to achieve the mission and vision of the organization. And that's why I said it's so important. Everybody, when they come to work, they need to know, like, why am I here? Why am I here? Because we are going to be the single largest and most successful electronics company in the world. Yeah! Right? So that's what you need to happen. That's why it's so important. I say everybody needs to internalize that. There's going to be a lot of complicated reports and strategies and tactics, but you need to, the mission and vision has got to be something that everybody can grab a hold of and know, like, oh, that's why I'm here. This is my purpose. This is my role.
I was just, in a case like Sony, where their vision is to be the #1 electronics retailer in the world, what would be their mission? That they're an electronics seller? That they're an electronics retailer?
Yeah, that they're a provider. Their mission is, I would say, well, we could finally get the annual report and find out, but I would think it's to be a worldwide provider of electronics and technology solutions. So I would think that their goal is to be in everybody's home. Right, to have a very high level of household penetration that, you know, and different strategic business units, they might have, you know, goals like that to say that, you know, 70% of Americans will own a Sony Vaio laptop. That's they set goals like that. We need to measure the level of household penetration and market share.
So we discussed vision and mission, but what are kind of the values? Are there like guidelines that the company or organization goes by? Like, we're not going to make cheap materials and sell for
right. What's important to the organization? So, for example, to respect diversity and cultural differences of our employees and our suppliers. That would be an example of a value that the company has. But what I would caution you is that it's got to be real. So it can't just be words on the website. We've got to actions speak louder than words. So if that's true, then you should be giving scholarships to minorities in the community in which you operate your business.
Just so I got this right, the functional plan implements the business plan?
Well, these are all shared objectives. So
I mean, like, the business plan is basically how we're going to do it, and then the functional puts it into action.
yeah, the functional is, you know, you said that we're going to achieve a high level of brand awareness. Then your marketing team needs to go to work, and they're going to develop advertising campaigns, print ads, commercials, outdoor ads to increase the level of awareness for our brand. Yeah, absolutely. And importantly, I want to emphasize this again, that these three, it's not one or the other, all of them. All of them, you have to have the corporate plan, the business plan, and the functional plan. It's not like, oh, when do you have one of these? No, you need to have all three. And we often refer to as shared objectives and goals. So everybody's trying to achieve the same goals and objectives. But how they do that, how they contribute to achieving that goal is going to vary. Well, you work in the marketing department, so the question is, how do you contribute to that particular goal? How do you make respect for diversity real? And how it's done in the finance department could be different. Or how it's done in the laptop division could be different than in the DVD player division. But we're all trying to achieve the same thing. The individual strategic business units and functional teams may have different tactics, different ways to go about that, and part of that might be determined by the market in which they operate. So these are different. The laptop market is going to be different in terms of, in relation to DVD players. So think of, for example, who the competitive set is. So who are our competitors? Do we have the same competitors in laptops as we face in DVD players?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, not necessarily, right? You could have a different group of companies that manufacture DVD players versus laptops. So we need to understand who are our direct competitors and who are our indirect competitors. And those things are going to influence how we are able to achieve the mission and the vision and the values of the organization. So it's strategic to determine the competitive set. Because that's not necessarily what you could describe as a right or wrong answer. It's strategic, and you need to provide a rationale for why that company is a direct competitor or indirect competitor. Take, for example, the beverage industry. What do you think? Milk and orange juice, are they direct competitors
Correct.
or indirect competitors?
Direct.
Direct? So tell us why.
Because both things you have in the morning.
So they're, what you're suggesting is that they're substitutes for each other?
They're against each other, and they could be against each other as a drink. I'm talking like the same thing. Let's say like Coke and Pepsi. That's a direct. But an indirect would be.
Well,
Coke
look at it.
and-
Now you're deviating. We could look at a lot of different scenarios, but yeah, no, absolutely. It could be, and that's something strategically that we need to decide. Or, as executives,
Isn't that a little general though?
yeah, but you might say, well, our direct competitors we might define as all orange juice companies. Let's say, so if we're Tropicana, we'll say Minute Maid, Simply Orange Juice, that those are our direct competitors.
But with the orange juice and the milk, they're two totally different things. You're not going to be pouring orange juice into your cereal to eat cereal.
All right.
So they're two different. So I would say that they're two different markets because you're not using them for the same. Granted, you can drink them just like you drink sodas and then be in the same market as a soda or water. But if
That's something
you're
that
not
we-
using them in the same thing.
That means something we need to look at, because the thing about indirect competitors is we don't classify them as indirect competitors to forget about them. The reason we classify them as indirect competitors is so we don't forget about them. Because look at what the dairy farmers did with the Got Milk campaigns. See, what does that tell us about the way they view competition? See, to me that says that they don't view other dairy farmers, they don't view other milk producers as direct competition per se. Because the Got Milk campaign is a campaign that's paid for by the Milk Farmers of America. I think that's the name of their trade association, or maybe it's the Dairy Farmers of America. But the idea is that the dairy farmers, right, the milk producers, they share the cost. So they're focusing on creating category need, or what we call sometimes primary demand for milk. So what they're saying is that, well, wait a minute, XYZ milk producer is not our competition. ABC milk producer is not our competition. Who's our competition? Orange juice! Right? Isn't that who they view as the competition? Because they're banding together because they realize, yes, like you were saying, that orange juice is a substitute for milk. And they did research to understand the benefits and the reasons why people buy milk. And that's why you've seen orange juice that has, and they promote this very aggressively, that it has calcium. Orange juice has calcium? Well, why do you think they do that? Because they believe that milk and orange juice are substitutes. And people drink milk for calcium. Well, if orange juice has calcium, they believe people will drink more orange juice. And it has vitamin A, and it also has vitamin D. And well, sounds like, is this not milk that we're talking about? And they say yes. And so from both perspectives, whether it's orange juice companies or milk companies, they both seem to believe that they're substitutes for each other.
That's why there's so many varieties of each kind, of milk and orange juice.
Yeah, absolutely.
To appeal to so many other people.
Definitely. Is something you wanted to add in the back? I saw your hand there.
Just at the beginning of the class, you were talking about different marketing schemes. You said one of them is like a delayed release date, and people will show up to the store. Is that not illegal in any way? Like, isn't that false advertisement to tell people you're going to have something in stock, and yet your books show the entire time you had no plans of having it in stock on that day?
Oh, yeah, that's a problem. Because usually what that suggests is, what usually happens in that case is what's called bait and switch. So you advertise something, like you said, that you never plan on having in stock, or you only have one, and you advertise it for $50, and people come in, and of course you don't have it, and then you try to sell them something that's not $50, but $150. Yes, the government does not approve of that. That's definitely illegal. All right, so these are the 3 types of plans, 3 levels in the organization. Let's see if we could talk now before we finish up. Oh, what, we have like 3 more hours. Okay, we're doing good. So let's talk about the Bcg model. This is a star, right? Right? Skills. If you can do this, then you also have skills. This is a star. This is a question mark. This is a dog. Okay? Yeah, this is a dog. Not to be confused with a dinosaur. But yeah, this is a dog. See? Teeth there. Right? This is a dog. Right?
Okay.
And this is a dog. This is a question mark. Sometimes this is referred to as a problem child. So there's a variation of the model, but traditionally the model indicates that this quadrant is the question mark, this is the star, and this is the cash cow. So I put a $sign there because in view of my dog drawing skills, I thought a cow would just be maybe, yeah, pushing it a little bit too far. So let's talk about how we read this, this chart. What this looks at is the level of growth in an industry. So this is what we use to do what we call portfolio analysis. So what we want to do is classify our strategic business units as either stars, cash cows, dogs, or question marks on 2 dimensions. And the 2 dimensions are the level of growth in the industry and the market share. Questions? You follow me so far? So this is about portfolio analysis. And this is very helpful because literally what you could do is do that on 1 page. Now you could have 100 pages as backup. That's going to include your market research. But what we want to do is to be able to capture that, right? Have a snapshot of the performance of our strategic business units or our product lines. All right, so market share and industry growth. So industry growth, so we're going to have the growth rate, and we're going to have the market share. And this we'll talk about next time. Growth strategies, remember I indicated, included market penetration, market development, diversification, and new product development. All right. but we'll talk about that next time. But let's finish this first. All right, we've got a couple of more minutes. All right. So, STAR, in terms of growth rate, the STAR has a high growth rate. The cash cow has a low growth rate. So it may be a product line or a strategic business unit that's operating in a mature category. But the market share is high. All right, so we see how to read this matrix? This is a 4-box matrix. This says that the STAR has a high growth rate and a high market share. That's the reason very often what companies do is they use the cash cows to fuel the growth of the STARs. So if you're growing, if you have a STAR in your portfolio, that's what, let's say a STAR would be, like a product type would be a tablet, right, like the iPad. So you have high market share and high growth, so then you're going to take something that's not growing as much, but is producing a lot of profit. So what do? If the industry is not growing, then should you keep investing heavily in a mature category? I mean, you need to maintain where you are, but what very often happens is companies reallocate their resources so that a large proportion of the profits from the cash cow they use to fuel the growth of the STARs, because that's the category that's growing rapidly. Does that make sense? Right? That seems plausible. But there's some consequences of that, which is, if you milk the cash cow for too long, then what starts to happen is you start to lose share. So you have to have a strategy that's going to allow you to maintain your position, which is you're a cash cow, which means you have a high market share, but you don't want to give that up. So you're going to use some of the income to fuel the growth of your STARs. Questions? Does this make sense? So this is how, again, this is portfolio analysis. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to classify our different strategic business units. We're trying to classify our different product assortments. We're trying to determine which are the STARs and which are the cash cows. So this model, the Boston Consulting Group model, says that a cash cow is one in which the market has low growth, so it's not growing, or is growing very little, but we have a high market share. The STAR is in a high growth category, and we have high market share. So that makes sense, right? You're the STAR. Why? Because you're in a high growth category, and you have a high market share. But in some cases, what do we do here with the dog? The dog we have very little market share. So we classify a particular product line of ours as a dog. That means that we don't have much market share, and the industry isn't growing. So we need to determine whether or not we should reduce the amount of money we're investing in these dogs, in these product lines where we have very little market share and in a category that's not growing. One of the things that makes a market attractive is this, well, a number of things, but certainly the growth rate. Is the market growing? That means there's future potential. And certainly also the size of the market is an element that many find attractive. So this is what we do. We look at all the product assortments, all our product lines, our strategic business units, and determine which are STARs. Why is that helpful? Because that tells us where we're going to allocate our resources, where we're going to spend our money. So if we have $100 million to spend on advertising, how much do we give to the stars? And how much do we give to the dogs? And the question marks. So the question marks are those where it's a high growth market, a high growth industry, but we have very little share. So certainly, low share, which is dogs and question marks, we're in a weak position. We have a very small percentage of the market. But in one case, it's really bad because not only do we have a small percentage of the market, but the market isn't growing. That's what we describe as a dog. The other is a little bit better. We don't have much market share, but at least the market is experiencing a significant amount of growth. So that means we need to determine these question marks. The reason they call it question marks is because, well, it could go either way, right? We have to decide. The market is growing, but we have very little share. So do we invest to try and get more share? Do we invest to try and get a bigger share of the market? So this helps us with our strategic decision-making process. So we could talk about this a little bit more next class. And